Alright, so viewers, fans, subscribers, all the same, welcome to Chapter 13 in the Space Bridge here at the Iacon Battle Circuit. Join me today as we delve down further into the stagnation, the understanding, and the pros and the cons of a lot of the historical elements throughout the dungeon fighter scene. Join with me today is one of its fellow competitors that also rose through the scenes to become a very established semi-professional player and a very established Ghostblade and Spectre player. I want to introduce you guys to GoneMadd.
Hello, everybody. Good to be here. Thank you for allowing me onto this place, and I guess I'm excited to share my view on the game and its community.
It's a pleasure having you today. How's everything been for the week?
Things have been fine. It's stressful because there's lots of exams and stuff since spring break is near for me. But yeah, no, I've just been enjoying college life, being a filthy casual.
Hey, there's no shame in that. Allows you to stop and smell the roses. That way you can see all the patches that we've walked through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you even get a chance to sit and explore new matchups. It's like I've been stuck on this character for so long, handling my business. How does it feel on the other side playing this character?
Yeah. Yeah.
Had a chance
Haven't
to
been.
explore any characters?
Uh, well, I mean, I have been somewhat recently going back to playing Ghostblade. I kind of dropped him for Spectre when she came out, and that was the case for basically, I guess, until Nendmaster came out, and even beyond that. But I don't know, the patch for Nendmaster definitely gave him some changes that have made him more enjoyable to me, and I think have definitely made him a lot better in some matchups. So I've been kind of re-exploring him.
Okay.
Yeah. So is
So I
there
know.
like a structure that you? Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. There is a good general structure
Okay.
to it. So let's go on ahead and begin. So delving into dungeon fighters or even DFO, what first brought you into either the fighting game community or into the IP for DNF?
All right. Well, I guess I can just go ahead and say how I got into fighting games and the community as a whole, because it's a pretty short and like connected story to getting into DNF Duel. So basically, I've I played fighting games on and off as like a kid growing up, not very frequently or very competitively, just like stuff like MKX, Soul Calibur before those games. Um, it wasn't until Mortal Kombat 11, around the time of its Aftermath expansion, that I actually started like grinding and trying hard in fighting games. Now I sucked, obviously, but uh, eventually, for some reason, some guy in a random server decided that he wanted to teach me how to play Tekken. So I tried Tekken. I sucked at that, and after I sucked at Tekken, I quit playing fighting games for like a year until they added Kazuya to Smash, and I was playing it with like just some random IRL friend,
Ooh.
and I realized that wow, I really hate playing Smash Bros, and I would just rather play Kazuya and Tekken. So I just went back to Tekken, still sucked at Tekken, and then I saw that Strive came out, and I saw pretty good reviews about it, and so I wanted to try it out, and so I got into Strive. I actually started entering tournaments and competing in it, and I wasn't good, but I also wasn't like a complete jobber anymore. I was kind of like the two-tour in brackets, just middle of the road player, and that's kind of where I was stuck, even though I was trying to get better. And during that entire time, there was this one game that constantly had my attention, which was this game that had gotten a trailer at a point like before Strive had even come out. It got this trailer, and it looked very good. It had its own unique art style, but it was still like very comparable to Strive. And that game was, of course, DNF Duel. And there was basically no information on the game at all. And that was the case for like a year after its first trailer came out. And after its first trailer, or after that second trailer came out, I affirmatively said in a chat, or a Discord that I was in, that DNF Duel would be my competitive breakthrough. And yeah, eventually the game finally did come out, and that's when I started actively participating in the community. So there's a nice, I guess, not so short timeline to where I initially started playing DNF Duel.
Okay, it's pretty straightforward though. From actually going from being on
Yeah.
a fundamentally based game to some delving down a little bit of the anime FGC rabbit hole, and then you come here, and then you actually do have your breakthrough here.
Yeah, no, I somehow was correct in that it would be my breakthrough. But yeah, at the beginning of DNF Duel, unlike a good amount of people in the community, I was kind of a complete nobody. I had no real connections in the FGC except for one specific server for a streamer for Guilty Gear. But aside from that, I didn't really have any interactions with people in the FGC, so it was not only my competitive breakthrough, but it was how I really got introduced to the FGC as a whole.
Okay. On the come up, what was the community like back then? Like, were there any influencers or techies or like down players and stuff? Like, give me an idea. Like, what was the landscape of the LAN like back then in the early days of Dungeon Fighters?
Yeah. So, sorry, my roommate just came in, but basically the community at the time, everybody was trying it because it was a new game, and it was a new game published by ArcSys, so it had that clout attached to it. But the initial what's it? Yeah, the initial community, it was I don't know. It was definitely a very mixed bag, and it was so big at the time that it was hard to like really narrow down, or like get to know people on a personal level. But I had interactions. Like I guess. All right, sorry, I'm just getting brain scrambled because my roommate came in on the phone talking to someone.
Oh, you
So I
can
guess just
take your
restate the
time.
question. Yeah,
Take your time.
sorry.
So, to reiterate the question, what was the landscape of Dungeon Fighters like back then in 2022?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, like I said, it was the hot new game on the scene, and Tampa Never Sleeps was running tournaments for it, and everyone obviously wanted to get top 8s in the new game. And at the time, it was kind of anybody could do it. I mean, the first tournament was won by Grappler, which was a character at the time who was not good. Never really did reach good status, but anyways, so yeah, it was a very diverse community.
Oh, him. Really? He won the very first tournament?
Yes, it was Gamnik. I think he's a Grand Blue player now. If he's entering anything, but yeah, he stuck around in the community for a while, longer than most people did. But yeah, so with this competitive interest, I guess it's a good time to introduce a very core aspect of my journey in this community, which is people, specifically Manny Blaze, like the Team Stickbug guy. He created a grind Discord for the game, and it was an invite-only kind of Illuminati server, like a lot of games have. But as time went on, more and more people got added to it, and eventually I was deemed worthy when I started doing well enough to be added. And so that's how I first entered the scene. And in that Discord, there was everybody that would end up being important, I guess you could say, in the competitive scene down the line was in there. there was the Tenured Mules, there was the Blue Linkies, Huberts, all those people that would come to basically appear in every single top 8.
Gotcha. Okay. And then that Discord essentially kind of shaped the landscape of the competitive field.
Yeah, at the time, it was basically where most people were getting their matches outside of ranked, because the ranked system, even at launch, when there was enough players, it was not very good. But people, competitive players, they would go in there to matchmake with each other. It wasn't the most populated Discord, especially among casual audience, because at the time, like I said, it was restricted to top players only. It was invite only. It was never that strict on who was allowed in, but yeah. And yeah, the primary Discord for the game, as far as a largest audience, was and is to this day the Reddit Discord, which at the time was owned by Wavie, I think. Which I never had many interactions with her, but definitely a very controversial name these days. But I personally never really liked, I guess, the culture that the server had at the time, because it was very, I don't know, just shit posty and spammy. And at the time, everyone was, well, not everyone, but I and my friends were trying to take the game seriously, so we
Quick thing.
naturally gravitated to the Grind Discord.
Okay. A quick question: Was Wavy? Did Wavy happen to become a Grand Blue player?
Yes, it's that Wavy.
Understood. Say less.
Yeah.
That's why I had to think for a second. It's like, wait a minute, this can't be her. It's like, oh shit, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Proceed. Never mind.
But yeah, but yeah, early on the game had a lot of early on the people that were dominating the game the most were definitely legacy players, that were coming from other games, specifically other anime games. So Masoma, Scrot, um, Sonicsol, people that had experience in other fighting games. Even Punk, for a time, competed in the game up until its first major balance patch. And yeah, they all saw a lot of success until balance patches started targeting their characters, and newer players on the scene started catching up. So, but yeah, lots of upplay, downplay, specifically on the striker side of things. The I think the most well-known piece of downplay has to be when Scrot Vermillion put out his Google Doc manifesto about why Striker didn't need to have her Guard Crush string reworked, because launch DNF Duel was a complete mess balance-wise, and even beyond Swiftmaster, which everyone knows about how brutal Swiftmaster was when the game first came out, characters like Hitman and Striker had extremely broken things about them, that being their Guard Crush string and the DP Shattering Strike for Striker and Hitman respectively, that were particularly egregious and people wanted out. And so when that first balance patch for the game hit, not too long after it came out, but people tend to forget that fact and say that it was unbalanced for a long time. But yes, Striker, her true Guard Crush string was removed, and Scrot put out an essay about why he thought that it should be or should not have been removed, and it became a meme in the community for
What
a
in
rather,
the world?
no, it was funny.
Yeah, it's like the dude was in a whole other mess of feelings.
Yeah, no, Scrot was, he was probably the OG striker down player, I'd say. He's the one that every striker player has tried and failed to live up to, and ever since he left, none of them are able to do it like he did.
He left a hell of an impression.
hmm I guess another meme of the early community that I can remember off the top of my head would have to be when Tiega, who we were talking about earlier, they made a list of the best players for each character. and that list was incredibly controversial because obviously people who weren't on the list were upset that they weren't on the list and thought that they deserved to be on the list and thought that Tiega was personally attacking them for not including them on the list. And some
Damn.
people, they took that as inspiration to improve, like I did, because I think I was like listed second underneath Tiega himself under Ghostblade. But other
Damn.
people just like kind of took the opportunity to rage about it and say like Perfect Legend actually, the MK player, he
Yes, the great
was
controversial one.
yeah, he was a Crusader player when the game initially came out,
I remember that.
and he he called himself well, he wasn't included on the list, and he was extremely mad at Tega because of the fact that he was he claimed that he basically made Crusader who he was, and that every Crusader player got their tech from him, and that the character would be nothing without him, and so he deserved to be on the list, and that was a very funny uh, interaction. But yeah, those are just some of the early events that I can remember happening.
Okay. The more you
Yeah, if
know.
there's anything more specific you want to like hone in on, just let me know. And you can interrupt me because I tend to ramble and go on tangents.
Now you good with the community? It sounded like you shaped a decent amount of it for me. What about which with matchmaking?
Oh yeah, I did mention that. So the game's matchmaking, it had a plethora of issues at launch as far as like just sometimes it would just completely break and you'd be unable to find any players and your game would crash or random stuff like that. But uh, the major issue, which is one that it still has to this day because most other things got patched out, is that it tends to just decide to match you with the same person over and over again. And it doesn't matter like what you know skill level they are in comparison to you. Like you could be like a deity player, the top rank, and just be matched with someone in bronze 4 like 10 times in a row, and it's just not a fun experience for either player. So even at peak hours with like 1,000 people online, most of them probably unranked, I would still run into like the same rotation of like 3 players every single time I'd get unranked, which I think is probably the main reason that the grind Discord was seen as necessary in the first place, was because top players, we just weren't getting matched with each other. Like, and if we were, it was with like the same people every single time. Like even across multiple days, I would only get matched with the same few people.
Okay, so I can see while that particular grind Discord did have a couple of like fall points to it, it was still a necessary avenue for the genuine expansion of creativity or your or competitive depth.
Yeah, it definitely, it's hard to quantify the like whether it's had a positive or negative impact on the game over the years, because I do genuinely think that early on it was integral to advancing the competitive scene of the game, because just the other server just wasn't, players just weren't satisfied with the state that it was in at the time. uh but yeah, it definitely split the community early on, which when you have a community that, I mean, at the time nobody knew, but a community that was going to very quickly start to decline in user base, uh, it's not good to have that split already into different subsections.
Okay, so going down that briefly, do you
Yeah.
feel like the trying to think, do you feel like the community leaders did a good job in promoting the game for its future?
Um. Well, I guess given that like I'm a community leader myself, in the sense that I was from very close to the beginning an admin for the DNF Grind, and now I'm the current owner of it. Uh,
Congrats on the
I
update.
did the best. Yeah. Well, we can get into that story later. But
Yeah.
as far as myself, I know that I did everything that I could. I tried my hardest while trying to balance real life, of course, because I mean, I'm young. At the time DNF was like becoming a thing, I was in like my last few years of high school. I was like struggling with AP classes and stuff, but I definitely tried my best. I pushed for the server. Well, initially, because like I said, Manny Blaze was the person who originally created the server, and big respect to him. I don't really know him that well at all, even though I was an admin under him for like 2 years. But I'm glad that he created the server. But I basically was well, it was me and Cal. We were basically co-owners of the server for a long time, and we pushed for opening the server up. And I was initially reluctant at the time because I was still in my like whole nah, this server is for the sweats, and we don't want people from the Reddit Discord to get in here and start shit posting and spamming. But eventually I realized that it would be the best for the scene, and we did start to open it up to the public. It was a gradual process, but once it was open to the public, yeah, me and Cal, we took to advertising it as best that we could. As far as other leaders in the community, at the time, I guess at the time it was really only in the Reddit Discord. You had Wavie and like the mod team that was there, and some TOs in the community. Obviously, people respected them, but at the time, even back then, I was just a moderator for the server in its early phases. But there wasn't really, I guess, a dedicated community leader, and that's kind of something that the game has struggled with to this day. In that, well, not to this day, but it struggled with it for a very long time. Is that it just doesn't really have like a central leadership. But yeah. So I guess that's my opinion on the leadership at the time.
Okay. And with preservation of gameplay, do you feel like the other leaders, if any, have what have they done in order to attempt to preserve the gameplay up to now? Or
Uh,
do you feel like new players feel there is a direction with the scene?
I would be very shocked if new players felt that there was a direction with the scene at the moment. Mainly because this game has really, for me, it's taken the back burner role. For me, I'm passively part of the community, but I haven't been invested in moving it forward or even really keeping it alive for a decently long time. And there, I will say that ever since Fish took over the Reddit Discord, it's dramatically improved. It's a much better place. I'm in there. I talk about DNF more in there than I do in the Grind Discord, mainly because the Grind Discord's just mainly for like random stuff that people that were part of its micro community uh, to talk about. But uh,
I take it the grind Discord has kind of like a serious tone to it.
it used to, but now it's just kind of an everything Discord. Like over time, it would build up a community of its own, specifically dedicated, to competing in it. But once competition starts to die, people don't really have much to talk about or matchmake in the grind Discord. And it makes more sense to ask for games in the larger server so that you can get any games at all. So it kind of just turned into, I mean, we just talk about literally anything in there at this point. People talk about rivals, other fighting games, uh, just complete random shit.
Okay. In terms of guides and structure for future character mains, do you feel like people left the proper notes in place for the next generation to grow or to prosper, even if a little bit?
Um, it really just varies character to character. I mean, there's some characters with extremely thorough documentation, like Ranger and Kunoichi, but there are also just characters that aren't popular or were never popular that just didn't really get anything in the way of like guides that are still applicable today. You know, I mean, when we had a balance patch for a game that has like, you know, a game that it's a game that peaks like at every day at like 12 players. Like, there's not going to be like, out of that group of people, there's not going to be people constantly updating wikis or making new character guides or anything like that. I've tried to help out where I, you know, can and when I have time, but I can't blame anyone for not making content because, I mean, it's gotten to the point where there are some characters that just don't have anyone that are like truly proficient in them, you know, that or like people who would constantly be making, you know, updated guides and resources. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you want to try and have like at the very least, if not a character specialist, someone that just like has dabbled with a little bit of tech in the area to sprinkle a little something out there. But if nothing exists, then nothing can prosper.
Yeah, I mean, my own character it was kind of a victim of that. It's been a victim. Ghostblade has been a victim of that throughout the game's lifespan because nobody really has wanted to learn him, and nobody has also wanted to learn how to fight him because nobody plays him. So he's kind of just like a very void of like resources character.
I thought Ghostblade was
And
like a broken character once upon a time.
uh he was never broken, but he was a good character, but he was a good character that required a lot more effort than most other good characters did when the game was, you know, popular. But he was a capable character. I think his viability probably peaked in the Grand Balance Patch era of the game, specifically because he had instant overheads versus Hitman. He had decent neutral versus any character in the game, really. And yeah, he wasn't really bad into that many characters.
Okay. Some guy here, Mr. Loverman.
What's that?
No, I said I was trying to see if there's something out here for Ghostblade. I see one dude out here actually put a
Mm.
pretty advanced
Yeah, that
trauma on
guy.
it.
I mean, there's Tiega made guides for the game when he still played, or for the character rather,
Yeah,
and most of them are still applicable. But stuff like combos and stuff, if there would be someone to do it, it would be me, and I just haven't had the time or will to do it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's just like, I mean, it's just not a very motivating. Obviously, it's a problem that creates itself and perpetuates itself in that, you know, you don't feel motivated to make resources for a game that's that's dead, and that nobody, you know, not many people are gonna even look at those resources, much less appreciate them to a good enough level. I mean, stuff like Cal, he created an entire like spreadsheet of tech against Ranger, against his own character, and very few people are aware of its existence, and even fewer people know pretty much anything from that spreadsheet, and still they'll complain about certain like setups or situations that have clear defined answers in that spreadsheet. So it's like the kind of thing of like, you know, is there a point in making something or in making guides for this game when it's not really going to make a difference, you know?
That can dwell on someone's mind.
Yeah.
Next question. In your opinion, what do you feel was the most broken mechanic in the game?
I think the most broken mechanic in the game is Indomitable Spirit, or IS. I think that it completely broke the game, competitively, and it's kind of, I'd say it is like almost entirely responsible for a large section of the competitive community leaving this game behind. Because beforehand, DNF Duel had its own. It was a very unique neutral system where everyone had big buttons and you were mostly acting preemptively, but it was still the case where if you did something really stupid and you whiffed, then you would die because you didn't have infinite access to white life in order to have infinite access to conversion. Because conversion basically just makes every interaction that you have be like, you do something, whether you're right or you're wrong, you do conversion, and it's still your turn, or you got a combo. And so every single character's game plan, for the most part, is to try and block a hit, get white life, and then use that white life to skip neutral and enforce their pressure. And it's not what I enjoyed DNF Duel for, which was just how unique every character felt from each other, Other fighting games, it kind of feels like you're doing the same thing with every character. Like, Street Fighter 6, it just feels like you're playing the same character on a fundamental level outside of like the extremely wacky ones.
So it
But
kind of didn't add
in DNF,
depth to the
yeah,
formula per se. It just kind of it just cut and
it
paste
homogenized
a
the cast.
yeah, yeah. It just basically
Yeah,
homogenized a whole template for doing the same thing with different characters.
yeah, exactly. And that to me was, and it, yeah, even beyond it just being something that I don't personally like, you cannot deny just how powerful it is as a mechanic. It is by far the most overpowered mechanic in the game.
Okay. Next question.
Mm-hmm.
Has the DNF IP aged well or adequately over the years after DFO or DNF and even the new IP entry that's coming in soon for this year, next year with a new Dungeon Fighters game that's going to try to expand the IP that I read up on? You think that the game's aged well over the years?
I mean, I think as far as like visuals go, I mean, I'm not like an original fan of DFO. Like I like my first exposure to the IP was through DNF Duel, but I definitely think that throughout the years, it's definitely consistently been a very flashy IP and very eye-catching, and all of its games that they're working on right now are definitely, well, I guess except for that like one Genshin Impact looking game, that one kind of looks generic as hell. But besides that,
Zoneless
it's
Zone?
they've definitely had their own unique art style as well as just animation style and just vibe to it.
Mm,
But I don't know. I mean, the IP has never been popular in the West, and I don't think it'll really become that much more popular, even with the other games. But yeah, like I said, I'm not really like a big DFO guy, but yeah.
okay. Uh, next question, when it came to tournaments or community activity, were there money issues anywhere or like any type of big investment from companies or big events in order to
Um.
resume investment to the IP's growth?
So when the game first came out, I'd say probably like a month or two into its launch, Nexon started sponsoring.
Oh, thank you,
Um.
absolutely. Hang on, someone in chat just commented about that. Hang on, Zenless Zone
What's
Zero
that?
belongs to Hyo. The creator of Genshin is not related to DFO at all. Okay, I
Well,
got you.
yeah,
No, I
they
was just
just
using
look
it
very
as an
similar.
example because he was saying something about
Yeah,
a
yeah.
Genshin relevant game. That's why I'm thinking that's the only thing that's like Genshin in the gotcha department that's like relevant
Hmm.
right now.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, Nexon, they decided to sponsor the pots for community tournaments, namely Can Opener ran by Yipes and, Tampa Never Sleeps. And so there was a time where we would get, like every week, there would be a online weekly tournament that would have a $1,000 prize pool. And there are a lot of ways to incentivize people to play in tournaments, but I think everyone can agree that massive prize pools are the easiest one. And so the game, during that time, the game had a ton of people that desperately wanted to get top 8 so that they could have a slice of that pie. And so early on, really, it was kind of the opposite of a money problem. Really, like the tournaments had too much money to ignore. And myself, I placed pretty highly in a few of those tournaments, and I ended up getting like a very significant amount of money, like somewhere in the realm of like $1,500 total during the time that they were running these sponsored brackets. And so at the time, it seemed like this would be a consistent thing where, they would just be pumping money into the game. But after the first major balance patch, they kind of just stopped doing it completely out of the blue. And ever since then, they haven't invested anything into any tournaments, whether it be prize pools or otherwise. So, yeah. But even without the $1,000 pots, people were still very generous in terms of donating to the prize pools for the tournaments. So, yeah, I wouldn't say that there was a money problem, really.
Okay. How about the content creators? Did the content creators for the video game go over any highlights across the game and whatnot in order to also kind of generate interest with the IP? It's not that wouldn't generally boost the IP, but it would help with boosting the awareness of
Of the game
of
itself,
its game.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is where I get into situations where I've, been a participant in some controversial things, but I won't hold back in answering about them. But so basically, as far as this game goes, content creation wise, ignoring the week one first impressions that every single fighting game YouTuber did, there were really not that many content creators that stuck around with the game, especially in terms of like pushing stuff to YouTube. I mean, there was a good few that were streaming it, every now and then, and things such as that. As far as, I guess we'll start with positive influences. I mean, at the start of the game and throughout its lifespan, even when it was starting to be like pretty dead, Maximilian dude, he created videos that put the game in a positive light, and at the time that was definitely a very unpopular thing to do. He was, very quickly DNF Duel in the creator space kind of turned from being a game everyone was hyped about to being just another punching bag. But he did fight against that current, and even though he wasn't like a consistent content creator for the game, I definitely think he had a very positive impact on it. As far as more, I'm sure there's a ton of creators that like I'll be forgetting, but other like smaller time creators at the time were like Huebert, Black Ace, Flowchart Ken, people like that who were actually making YouTube videos and actually streaming and making content for the game. And then there's finally probably the game's biggest content creator that it had in the not in the like late early stages, that being Sonicsol. And I guess I'll just go ahead and say this outright, that I don't have a problem with Sonicsol anymore. I'm not sure if he has a problem with me. I haven't really been keeping up with him, but he's we we definitely were not on good terms last time that we spoke with each other, but he kind of ended up being the face of the game at the time, and at the time he was not the kind of face you'd want to have for a game that was already struggling. His streams were, I think, pretty indisputably very negative, not necessarily towards the game, but towards the community and just toward it was just filled with negative energy.
He had like a critic
He
type of
was
energy.
Yeah, he was very vocal about calling other players trash. He would, for hours on end on his stream, speak on how bad certain players were, such as myself. But then he would also be kind of two-faced about it, and when you'd like try and bring it up to him, he'd be like, "No, it's just all in the game, man. It's nothing personal. I don't actually think these people are bad players." But yeah, I could go on and on about negative interactions that we had with him, but yeah, as a whole, the community was not. I don't think that the community as a whole was appreciative of his impact on the game, because basically, it got to a point where he was actually the reason that I became a moderator for the Grind Discord, because even at the very start of the game, it was a controversial decision to let him into that Discord because of his behavior. And people were afraid that he would start stuff, and that at the time it was pretty much just Manny who was like running the server, because the other people he had like founded it with weren't really participating. And so Manny was never really at any point active in the DNF Duel community, despite making one of its most influential servers. He's kind of a non-player in it, so in the whole like grand scheme of things. So people wanted moderators, and I usually tend to end up finding myself in positions of, leading the community or just moderation in general. So I had experience that made me the choice that people wanted, and the community's fears were proven right, because very quickly Sonicsol was constantly starting fights with people in that Discord, and it got to a point where we eventually had to ban him from the Discord. I think multiple times. No, we would like tell him to stop arguing with someone, and he would just leave, and then like a week later he'd rejoin, and that continued until he like left and rejoined like 5 times, and so eventually we just banned him. And that kind of was like the breaking point of him interacting with anyone in the wider community. So his only streams of the game would be him going onto ranked, shit talking the community, and complaining about not being invited to tournaments or whatever that weren't even invitationals, that were just open signups. But he pretended like he was getting blackballed by everyone just because we wouldn't let him into a Discord server. And eventually he did just leave the game. I think around the time Street Fighter came out. I don't really know what he's been up to. Yeah, Street Fighter 6. I don't really know what he's been up to since then. I don't know if he's changed. I think he unblocked me on Twitter. I don't know if that was like an intentional thing, or if it was just I'm unblocking everyone because I'm going through a reform arc or something. But I don't have any like leftover disdain for him. I don't have that for really anyone in the community.
Yeah, it's like a mute point right now.
Yeah, it's stuff that happened like years ago. I mean, like, I'm not gonna act like I wasn't like in his chat trolling him whenever he would be like, angry about something that was said or done by people in the community. It was just like, yeah. His existence in the community was not generally a positive thing.
It shaped the direction. It just might not have been the best direction.
I don't know if I would even say that he really shaped the direction. It was kind of like he was trying to shape it in a certain way, and then he kind of got left behind and was rather upset about that.
Yeah, like
because the community just decided to go its own way.
Like a sense of like strong vanity, because he wanted to, I guess, to kind of be about him.
Yeah, something like that.
Something to that
but
degree.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We'll go into the developers themselves. Did the developers Nexon, did they ever seek brain? Did they ever seek to continue establishing communications, or just generally establish a sense of consistent communications with the audience or the consumer?
I think I think they did a series of half measures a few times throughout the game's lifespan that were genuinely pathetic in how useless they were to actually establishing a sense of community or communication from them. Like I said initially, at first, even when the game first came out, or was even first revealed, it was revealed, and then for an entire year there was complete silence from them. So that kind of like was the start of them just being completely neglectful of like building a community. And then, like I said, when the game came out, they started putting money into prize pools to incentivize people to compete in it. The game was part of the Arc World Tour, which was mainly Arc System Works' doing. So I don't know if I'd really count that as being part of the devs, considering ArcSys's role was mostly as a publisher and like some art stuff. But anyways, there was that, but then they just turned it off, or they stopped doing it overnight, and then it was basically the entire game. It's just been complete radio silence from them. We will occasionally, or well, we did occasionally get updates from them on, oh, the season pass is going to come out at some point, maybe. And then they'd say, oh, here's, a roadmap of characters, and our first DLC is going to hit the shelves 1 year after the game's creation. And, when you're not given any warning for that stuff, when, like, everyone's thinking, like, oh my god, it's March of 2024, and we're finally going to get Spectre, and then they hit you with the, yeah, she's coming in 3 months, you just kind of get, I don't know, disincentivized to even care about the game. But
Just about, because like what the original
yeah,
thing for her was like what damn near like a year off, and then the next time you hear about
yeah.
it, it was like a couple of months off.
Yeah. Basically, I mean, 100 days into the game, so about 3 months into the game, they put out a tweet that had a cake, which I guess I can hold on. DNF Duel cake. Yeah. So they put out a cake, and people noticed that there were like toppers on the cake that corresponded to different DLC characters, right? On the so you can put it on stream. But
Oh
the
yeah,
they basically did a soft announcement of a season pass, because everyone knows that like season passes typically have about 4 or 5 characters. So everyone was like, okay, these are all very clearly, they're popular characters that people want. Spectre, extremely highly requested. Monk, very highly requested. And, all the other, I mean, people just wanted more. I will say that is one thing that DNF Duel did great. They made people fall in love with the idea of getting more characters from this IP just because of how unique they were.
and I love that
People,
concept because there was a
yeah,
lot of characters you could actually draw from that have a male and a
there
female
were.
version of a lot of these characters that are known only by their code name. So in theory, you could have a big ass roster for this game.
Yeah, no, it was a very popular thing near the start of the game for like even like streamers, like more conventional streamers, to just go through like DFO, the MMO's like character list, and just like see the trailers for the characters and theorize how they would look like in DNF Duel. And it was an idea that got everyone excited. And so the fact that they managed to, very quickly establish this hype with promises of future content to come and with teasers on, like on the cake, and then they just immediately go silent for, I think it would have to have been like 6 months until you finally get an announcement of the season pass. And it's just like, why? Like, why couldn't you have just ran with that momentum? Well, I guess I do know the reason why, and that's because it was um, around September of the year the game came out, so September 2022. There was an event, CEO Taku, and there was a representative from Arc System Works who was there, and a player talked to this representative, and basically just like they just had a conversation with them. There were some interesting tidbits that came up talking about like uh, how Launcher was originally meant to be Spitfire from the MMO, and that they had to like change her because she was too broken. Um, and like that Launcher was just heavily nerfed before launch, which made sense because she was absolutely terrible when the game came out. But things such as that um, were the things that they talked about, but I think the most interesting thing is that the Arc System Works representative said that Nexon had absolutely zero plans whatsoever for the game's future. As soon as they were expecting the game to come out and for people to be perfectly content with it the way that it was and to just be able to leave it on maintenance mode while everyone kept playing. It was an extremely you have to be almost like blind to the state of the gaming industry as a whole, much less fighting games, to think that that's close to a relatively good idea. And so when people started to get upset that there was no new content, and when people started to get hype for the idea of new content, they panicked and had to rush to create announcements of announcements of announcements of announcements. And trying to stall for time and keep like any semblance of hype going for a year after the game came out, because most games like Strive, they'll have their season 1 pass like in active development, for months before the game even comes out, just because they want to like very quickly get into a release schedule. But for DNF Duel, they had to start from complete scratch months post-launch when they realized that people weren't content with the way things were.
And had to backtrack, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, they had to invest more than they thought they would have to, and they had nothing started, So I would not be surprised if there was not a single line of code or a single, model built or voice line recorded for any of the DLC characters. I would not be surprised if none of that existed by the time that they made that cake teaser. And they just put that out there because they were panicking and just were like, we have to have, a soft confirmation of a season pass.
Gotcha.
But the thing is, like, when the only evidence that your game is ever going to receive any more content up until 9 months after launch, when all that you have is like a random cake in a random teaser or like in a random celebration post that you have to like know about the MMO to like decipher what it means and like all that stuff. It's not like a public enough thing to like give the general player base confidence, in the game's future.
That is kind of vague in some sense, because it's the type of promo where
Yeah.
it's if you know, you know, but not something generalized.
Yeah.
Was like,
And
oh,
if you
this is
already
that
know,
IP.
yeah, and if you already know, then you're already invested in DNF Duel as a game. It's the kind of thing where like, if you can see that and you get anything out of it, then you already were going to stay with the game regardless of whether there was a DLC. If you were someone that was like, oh, I don't want to stick with this game because I don't think it's ever going to get any DLC characters or updates, and then you just see like a random cake saying happy 100 days of DNF Duel, then you're going to get nothing from that. And that's what people got from it, was nothing, and so they just stopped playing.
Okay. Now, I came across something very interesting when I looked at DNF 2025 here that's talked about. It's from this, looks like an adequately credible source on here. Talked about Nexon and Tencent that have signed a new agreement to enhance the DNF IP in China. Another organization called Nepal will lead the development, while Tenet focuses on the localization in order to tailor content to Chinese players' preferences. This hyper-localization aims to deliver a more customized gaming experience. Now here, there's a couple of angles here that doesn't sound viable to really delve down like reinvestment or interest, but I found this to be very fascinating because if I'm not mistaken from what I've read so far and studied from a lot of the past takes that I've heard and gathered from past opinions, China is one of the lesser areas along with Korea, if I'm not mistaken, where the DNF IP hasn't prospered that greatly.
No, DNF is actually it's mostly an Eastern property. It's actually kind of the other way around, where that's where the game is like at its peak, relevance, I guess you could say. Because I mean, Nexon and Neopol is just like a developing they're like a company underneath Nexon. They're basically the same, synonymous with each other. But
Okay.
Neopol, yeah, they're a Korean company, and so their primary like fan base is like East Asian, like Korea, Japan, China, countries like that are actually like their bread and butter. So yeah, I'm not. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not like a huge DFO guy, but I'm not entirely yeah, I don't really know like the grander significance of what this like tweet could mean or like this plan could mean.
Same. That's why this is recent. This is March of this year.
Yeah, yesterday.
So they could be trying to take an IP growth with this alongside that new launch
Which
for
I
the
mean,
game, maybe for all
when you
I know.
consider the fact that um stuff made by Hoyo, like games like that, uh, like the developers for those games are Chinese, and the user base for like Genshin Impact, for Zenless Zone Zero, games like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a very large amount of it is a Chinese audience. It makes sense that it's most likely that their efforts that they're speaking about are in regards to that like Genshin Impact clone DFO game that they showed at the Game Awards. I think that that's probably the main thing that they're talking about when they talk about trying to tailor content to Chinese players' preferences. So like gotcha stuff.
Okay. So this could also have to do with the DFO RPG, JRPG, whatever it is that may be the new game coming out. This may correlate to that for all we know, in order to develop into like
Oh yeah,
the gotcha
could be
element
any.
of that game. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Next question. I want to delve into the DLC characters pass
Okay.
and how they affected the grid and the meta on further investment, or just each one of these characters. How did the patch and their inclusion to the video game help shape the landscape of the video game's continuation?
So I guess to set the scene beforehand. So before Spectre's release, and thus like the first character of the season pass,
Bottom right, chat.
the game had only undergone or the game had only had like one major balance patch that they refer to as the grand balance patch, in which that's what most people refer to it as nowadays. And that was a patch that at the time at least everyone agreed was, well, not everyone because I can't speak for everyone, but the majority of players agreed was a large improvement over the base game. And the
This was the huge
state of the
balance
game.
pass that came with her initially that started the whole thing.
No. This was a just a completely independent patch of any DLC characters. This was in December of 2022, and
Oh, okay, okay.
Spectre didn't come out till like June of 2023. So like a whole 6 months later. So we were on that patch for 6 months basically, and the by the end, right before Spectre was going to come out, the patch we had definitely started to get stale, and it had definitely started to show its cracks as far as it feeling a lot of matches feeling samey, and like a lot of characters just kind of dominating while others just sat in the sidelines. But it was still like a positive view on it. And then Spectre's patch came out, and it introduced two mechanics that were, I'd say, very detrimental to the game's popularity as well as its competitive play. And those would be IS, or Indomitable Spirit, which we've talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
and back roll, which made the neutral a lot more scrambly and mashy and just non-committal. And both of those things combined to make the patch overall, even though like Spectre came out and she was a new character and she was fun and people liked her, it was kind of ironic because they introduced a mechanic, that being Indomitable Spirit, where you get white life off of blocking any stray hit, and they added a character that you can block from across the screen. So they managed to put in a character that was directly countered by the system mechanics that they added to the game. And so, along with her kind of launching somewhat undertuned, it kind of just made her not really popular. And so, when you have a DLC character that isn't very popular as far as maintaining a player base on them, and you have a patch that ruins the game competitively for a lot of top players, um, it's just a recipe for disaster for the competitive scene. I mean, and yeah, that's not to mention the character specific changes where they kind of gutted a lot of, I don't know, they completely gutted some characters, and they removed a lot of routes that people had enjoyed doing, like combo routes, and so that also was responsible for a good portion of the community leaving. But yeah, so after she came out, there was a few months of a wait until Brawler would come out, and Brawler was kind of the opposite of Spectre, where while she launched undertuned, Brawler launched overtuned, and that introduced a very it basically made the problem of DNF duels very slow patch cycles even more like evident, because that was when people realized, oh, we're not going to get any balance changes. We're not going to get balance changes with every single DLC character. It's only whenever they feel like it, since Brawler came with no balance changes whatsoever. And so we were forced to come to the realization this character was going to be broken, this character was going to be top tier until, well, we don't know how long. We don't know if he'll ever change. And so a lot of people were like starting to get iffy on whether they wanted to keep playing in a game that was even more volatile than it was before, and that was not going to get balance changes, basically. And I mean, it's not like Brawler killed the game or anything, because it was kind of already dead. But by the time, like, you know, he came out, the tournament, like offline tournament scene was kind of on its last legs. And after that, there was another 3-month wait, which, I mean, you know, I must say, you know, even though it took them a super long time to finally start putting out the season pass, at the very least they were like pretty consistent and pretty fast with releasing characters after another. You know, it was only like a 3-month wait each time, and it was the characters were adequately like revealed and teased beforehand, so it's not like they were just kind of like dropped out there. But then December comes around and Battle Mage gets released, and the season pass at this point has kind of reached it's kind of like lost all of its momentum or like fanfare or popularity in the greater like sphere of the fighting game community. Like, I think Brawler was the last character I saw anyone like really excited for coming out, you know, in the grander FGC. I think all Battle Mage got was like a random tweet that got like 1,000 likes because her orbs were called chasers, and that word has a different meaning in I think the trans community, and so people were like, they said the funny word, and then that was basically all that the character got as far as like notoriety. And yeah, the game never really recovered as far as regaining any popularity throughout its season pass. And so Battle Mage was once again a character with no balance changes associated with her, which meant that it was 6 months after Spectre had come out, and by the time Spectre had come out, we had been playing on the Grand Balance patch for 6 months. So Battle Mage marked kind of the point where we had been playing on the current patch for longer than we had been playing on the patch that most people agreed was the best patch for the game. And it really, like, it was already an issue of the game getting stale on the Grand Balance patch, and that was a patch that people liked and had been out for months beforehand. And had been out for 6 months, but in that same time period, a patch that most people do not like, and it having been out for 6 whole months, people just kept losing interest, you know? It wasn't like an overnight thing of like everyone dropped the game instantaneously. It was like just a slow decay as people, like, you know, they stopped believing in the sunk cost fallacy that eventually things would turn out for the better.
Let's see here.
And
July 2023 was when she came out,
yeah,
and then a few months before, and that was when she first came out. But the patch before her that I think was like the better patch from what I've heard so far, that was
it was
6 months
December of
prior.
2022. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, Brawler came out September of 2022, or sorry, September of 2023,
And
and
then Little Battle
it
Mage
was
here,
Battle
or she came
Mage
out like
in
right before
December.
Christmas.
Yeah, December of 2023,
Mm-hmm.
and then yeah, we move on to Monk in March of 2024, and Monk at
This
the
dude over
time,
here, chat.
yeah, at the time Monk was the as soon as he launched, everyone knew that he was the best character in the game, basically. He was a character that completely broke the rules of the game entirely, did way too much damage, and just in general was very frustrating to fight. And yeah, so for instance, just to like explain like what makes a character so broken, it's in DNF Duel, there is basically no true high-low mix. There are situations where it's like hard to block it, but there are very few characters and very few situations where you would get actual high-low mix that you could combo off of, right? And characters that had access to that were considered to be very, very good. But as time went on, they made it less and less available to other characters because it used to be like half the cast could instant overhead big body characters, and then it was just Ghostblade and Berserker. And now they've made it so that only Berserker can instant overhead some of the big bodies, and it's very restrictive on that. But then Monk comes in, and he just has a standing overhead that leads to a combo, and that he can mix with an unseeable low, and can kill you for it entirely. He just completely breaks, the rules of like this is mostly like a guard pressure game, not like a mix game. You're not going to have to constantly be fuzzing and constantly be,
Oh my god, this
making
dude
sure
is
you're
a
blocking
Slayer
high
clone.
versus low. But yeah, he on top of that though, he had the ability to uh he had the ability to do like a backsway that is invulnerable on frame 2, which meant that like if you're not perfectly meeting him, he's able to do it. And immediately after that, he could go into an armored, completely armored on like the same frame that you activate it. So there's no gap where he's like punishable before the armor becomes active. It is an overhead, and it launches for an insane amount of damage. And so he's a very scary character to defend against. He's a very scary character to even do your own pressure on, and his neutral is completely broken because of IS, allowing him to just do, block any button and then do 5M, which is an armored move that traverses the entire screen, and he kills you if you get hit by it. Pretty much uncontestable by a lot of the cast, and he's able to do that and then get in for free. And so the character dominates into like defense, neutral, and offense.
Damn,
Uh,
he is. So he's like genuinely
yeah, so
well-rounded.
incredibly broken character, pretty much instantaneous top 1, and at that point was kind of when people lost all hope in the game ever being balanced, if they hadn't before. And
Like it's good to release a good
so
character, but you also want to make sure that the character has counterplay.
yeah, and Monk was not a character that had counterplay, really. He was very broken, but and again, we had no idea if the game would ever receive another balance patch at the time, so things were kind of doom and gloom. After Monk's release, there was like a few months wait until eventually. Actually, funny thing about Monk's release is that Nenmaster was just in the game, in the game's code, and she was data mined pretty much immediately, and she was in a playable state, and so people got to see the character basically like 3 months before she was finished. And I guess that was kind of a relevant thing because people were talking about DNF Duel, even if it was to say, wow, this game's devs are so incompetent that they left a fully playable version of their next DLC character in the code.
Well,
But
chat, what can you say? I mean, controversy, publicity is good publicity, is all I can say. Even if it is something very bad. as
Yeah, no, I mean, it was
development and
probably the last thing
politics.
people talked about this game for,
Yeah.
ever. But after that, 3 months pass and Nenmaster gets released, and there's a balance patch. It's not really that significant as far as changing things around. Some like I mean it really was like just a complete like shotgun balancing of just doing whatever the fuck they thought would be interesting. They like none of the very few of the changes made sense to anyone that like actually plays the game. They were buffing characters that were already considered in the top 3. They were doing nobody really got nerfed again because this game never really
Tough nerfs,
this
just
game
buffs.
tried not to balance, yeah, not to balance around nerfs, except for the Spectre patch for some reason. But regardless, it just wasn't. It just really wasn't a significant patch as far as providing a new experience. Nobody's like problems with the game were really solved. If anything, they were just made even worse. But they did kind of bring up the lower end characters to be able to slightly compete with the higher end ones.
Okay, that's something. So a little bit more representation.
Yeah. But I mean, representation in what, you know? Because at this point, I mean, it is almost a year ago, but it feels like it's still like already.
Feels
it
longer
still
than
feels
that.
like modern day, you know? It's like, uh, the game just doesn't have anything to like really show off the characters in. Thankfully, we've been getting more TNSs like recently. You know, they've decided to bless us with featured spots, but
Yeah.
aside from that, there's not really much going on. So.
Side note, uh, with Nenmaster, her data mine version is different than her genuine release version, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, nothing's like different. It's just the Nenmaster in the files was just an incomplete version of the one we got. Like she had most of the same moves, just without what's it? She had most of the same moves, just without like special effects or voice lines or things like that. So we were able to get an idea of what the character would be like before she came out.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Next question.
Hmm.
Was with the IP, with the game as it is now, if it was re-released today at face value, do you feel that the game has a chance in selling properly? If it was re-released today as it is at face value?
I mean, it would just have to depend on. I don't think that it would succeed. No, I mean, because I don't think the devs ever really learned the like right lessons from what happened. Because I mean, like a fighting game in this day and age, it needs constant content, it needs constant support, it needs constant communication, and the devs to this day have not figured out how to do that. And so I just think that they would end up making the same exact mistakes. Unfortunately, I wish I had a more optimistic point of view, but that's the most likely situation.
Okay. And that's honest. Like that's all you can
Yeah.
go off of because that's literally is what's shown of Nexon's current and pre-existing business patterns.
Hmm.
Um, Next question. When do you think the game actually died?
Uh, well, I guess. I mean, there's no like clear cut point that it died, but I will say that I feel like the game's competitive scene died just whenever everyone moved on to other fighting games. Every top player that like, you know, whenever you're playing in a game for a year, and you're competing at the top level, and you're making friends with all these top players that are all the best at their characters, and it's like an iron sharpens iron kind of thing where you're all just getting better together. It kind of turns into a kind of thing where when those people start leaving, it's kind of just it just makes the game feel empty, and it makes it feel just less serious. Like, just to name some names, like Blue Linkies, I feel like is, well, or at least was the best DNF Duel player. Not to glaze too hard, but like he's he had an understanding of the game and a commitment to improving at it that very few other players had. And as time went on after the Spectre update, he kind of just played less and less. And the same thing happened with players like Taco. Same thing happened with Huebert, Tenured Mule, Cow. Like, all these players that initially were like entering every single tournament, it kind of just felt like everyone was just moving on from the game. So I guess it would be, after the Spectre patch, and it wasn't even really the fault of the patch itself to such a degree that I think it made everyone leave. I think it was just it was just a failure to meet our expectations and our hopes.
Like it got your hopes up for nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, because everyone was like, "Oh, this is the patch that's going to save DNF Duel," and then we get it, and like some people's characters got entirely destroyed, like to like a bottom, like went from top like 5 to like bottom 1, like insane balance shifts that weren't in ways that people wanted, and new mechanics that just confused everything and just made the game not like how it was. And yeah.
It felt like the game became more and more of a shadow of its former self as it tried to evolve, but the company's lack of communication and whatnot just didn't solidify the correct direction that you want to commit to.
Yeah. It was basically just like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, the game's entire lifespan, it felt like.
Yeah.
And so people kind of just got tired of that. And I mean, like, why waste your time, trying to be a top competitor in a game like DNF Duel that has no support from the developers, has no like consistent balancing ideology or consistent content schedule or anything like that, when you can just go be a top player in Grand Blue, or you can just go be a TO for Grand Blue instead, And it's not like Grand Blue is like insanely popular or anything, but like still, it's like in comparison to DNF Duel, it's basically like night and day.
Yeah. Follow-up question. What changes would you propose, gameplay-wise or mechanic-wise, to make it better or more appealing for newer players to come in? Or even, in this context, even for older players to return?
Yeah, I'm not sure, like, what... I mean, the biggest hurdle for new players is, like, new players, they're not going to care about Indomitable Spirit homogenizing the cast's gameplay, because they don't... One, they don't know how to use it anyways, and two, they don't know what the cast was like before when they first get into the game. So I don't think like any mechanic is really to blame for new players not getting into the game. I think it's entirely just the game being dead, it being a Discord fighter, and the devs having no communication with the player base. I think that's like the only thing that stops new players from getting into the game. As far as bringing old players back that were like more competitive, I mean, honestly, it's kind of the same thing where just the lack of developer support is like enough to keep those people away. But also, I mean, I can only speak for myself and, my friends and fellow competitors that share the same viewpoint, but like just remove Indomitable Spirit or rework it entirely, because having infinite, limitless access to White Life is just not good for the balancing of the game. It makes it way too basically impossible to balance. And also the cube system needs to be heavily reworked, because I completely forgot that even came in with the Spectre update, but because their goal with it was to try and make a choice between, at 30% health, you get this much better awakening, but there's a risk that you won't be able to properly use it because you're at such low health, versus clear cubes where it's like at 50% you get a weaker version, but someone on the balancing team, I guess, just didn't feel like trying, and so 90% of clear cubes in the game were, and still to this day are, infinitely better than the gold cubes, and you get them at a higher health threshold, so they're easier to access. It's a complete balancing failure.
I'm about to say I've heard a similar mechanic like this. This feels like they're having their own implication of an ability select system, like how
Yeah.
like what Central Fiction has, but instead of it
Well,
being
yeah,
something that you
it's like kind
choose
of like
at the
V
beginning,
Trigger in
it
Street Fighter Five.
yes,
Yeah.
that's a better comparison. Yeah, it's literally like that. That's what this sounds like.
Yeah, on paper it's a good idea, but they just kind of messed up the execution of it. Like, for example, Ghostblade, his clear cube makes it so that he gets a 14% damage increase, and that's both like actual damage and like chip damage. His guard damage is increased. His movement speed is increased dramatically, and of course this activates at 50%. Meanwhile, his gold cube makes it so that you can jump cancel some of his special moves, which is, it sounds good on paper, but is completely useless in application. His it makes it so that his teleport has slightly less recovery, and he has a slightly faster movement speed buff compared to his clear cube. And this is a game where it is not uncommon to die in 2 touches. So there are, in most games, unless you're like a very bulky character like Crusader, you're probably not seeing your gold cube. You're probably just dying before you can even use it. So to have it be locked behind a health threshold so low, and to have it be so bad, is just kind of, yeah, it's just not good. And there's tons of other characters besides Ghostblade who have the same kind of thing.
Where that cube system is an issue for them to optimize properly
Yeah.
off of most situations where you would want to apply that for.
Well, yeah, they just have, like, there's some characters in the game that have really good clear cubes and really good gold cubes. And then there's some characters that have only a single choice, and it's kind of like just giving, it's like a freedom. It's supposed to be like a universal freedom of like, oh, you can choose how to tailor your playstyle, but in the end it just ended up restricting certain characters and causing other characters, typically ones that were already really good, to have more freedom.
Okay, so the good characters basically become the top tiers become topper tier, and low tiers
Yeah.
become mid unless they already had struggle bus neutral finite points.
Yeah. Basically. It was, yeah. I definitely think that that is a system that can be salvaged. I don't think that the current Indomitable Spirit system can be salvaged, because it's a problem that they inflicted on themselves, where they implemented it because a criticism of the game was that people were getting put into like checkmate guard break situations too frequently. And so they put in Indomitable Spirit, which makes it so that the next, you block it, a hit with it, and it makes it so that the next attack that you block does no guard damage. So you can, in theory, spam it and never get guard broken.
Wait a minute,
But
that sounds like Indomitable. Not to cut you off, that sounds like Indomitable
yeah,
Spirit was added in response of, hey, neutral for this game was kind of figured out.
yeah, I mean, there were definitely characters, like specifically Ranger and Berserker, whose game plan were to basically win neutral, which wasn't hard for those characters, and then put you in a situation where they would just put you in a block string that you can't do anything about, and you get guard broken and die. That was an issue. But in order to counter that issue, which, by the way, Indomitable Spirit doesn't counter it, because it's both nearly impossible to, like, fully, like, to use it, like, enough against certain characters like Ranger or Inquisitor, like press it with the correct timings to completely nullify the guard damage, so you're probably still getting guard broken anyways, but it just gives an insane amount of, causes you to take an insane amount of white life as damage, to the point where you would probably take less damage if you just took the guard break. And so that makes it fail at its original purpose, and on top of that, they were like, okay, well, now nobody's going to get guard broken because we have Indomitable Spirit, so we need to lower everyone's guard gauge and make it easier to get guard broken because of the mechanic we added to counter guard breaks. And what that did is it just made characters like Ranger become even better because they're able to, characters that were able to contest people's guard gauges were characters that thrived in Spectre Patch. And then they also made it so that basically what they did is they made guard gauges lower, but they also made it start to recharge a lot faster as well. And what that meant is that characters who applied pressure over like a longer period of time and weren't constantly making you block, but were instead leveraging their neutral control in order to make you block a bunch of stray hits. So characters like Ghostblade, for instance, are or
Building up
even
their win
Spectre.
condition, if I'm
Yeah,
hearing you
it's
right.
like an overtime thing where they would like chip at your guard gauge from like half or full screen instead of like just in one sequence breaking it like Ranger would. And so by making it so that your guard gauge starts recovering a lot faster, they nerfed playstyles like that. And so more methodical neutral playstyles kind of just became not viable to do. It kind of just was, you were forced into just aping out in neutral, putting them on defense, and then using all of your mana to try and guard break them or do enough chip damage to justify it through them using IS. And yeah, so that was another way that IS kind of homogenized cast because it kind of just removed options for playstyles with the update and the like countermeasures against it that it brought with it.
Okay. Next question. What point of the game's lifespan, in your opinion, did you feel like was the best?
I'd easily say that it would be basically immediately after the release of the Grand Balance patch, because that was when the game was at its competitive peak, I'd say. Maybe not in terms of entrance, like, player counts, even though it was still getting a very respectable amount of entrance at every offline tournament, but that was when I'd say the player base was at its best as far as skill and as far as like improvement, constant improvement goes. There were lots of there were lots of players and lots of players for each character basically. While while like nowadays, there's not very many, but back then, like, people were constantly entering tournaments, people were constantly learning new characters, people were constantly like learning like player versus player matchups and like really like actually grinding the game. But that just kind of stopped eventually. And it kind of, so I'd say like immediately after it came out is when I'd say the game peaked in terms of its quality as well as just like the quality of its competitive scene.
Okay. That was like the best quality of life era. That was the Grandmaster patch. Just was before the Battle Pass. That set the stage for it.
Yes, it was before the season pass. It was a few months after launch, and it added a lot. It
All those
caused
mechanic
like
changes and stuff.
it caused a lot of characters to actually become characters, because like at launch, characters like Launcher or Ranger had like 11 frame buttons as their fastest option in a game where like nowadays like the slowest one is 7 frames, and that's still considered a very bad thing if you have a 7 framer. So like for there to be characters that only had 11 framers as their options, it was just not a good time for them.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I remember she got above. Well, I think also Enchantress and got something out of that, and just to name
Every
a
every
couple. So
character got buffed
everybody
in
got
that
something.
patch. Yeah.
Okay. Last question.
Oh, okay.
In the current landscape of the gameplay, what's your advice for newer players coming in, or for people that just want to try and just give it a shot and see what type of gameplay it is, or it was, or what it can be?
I guess my advice for new players would be to join the Reddit Discord, because that's the only place you're going to be getting matches in. Use the character channels to learn about whatever character you're playing, because even if there isn't tech there, you can ask in there in like any of the channels, and someone will probably answer your questions. And I guess if you want to just learn what the game was like before, you could always. I mean, Huebert put out a ton of videos over, while he was playing the game. He there's VODs of Clover Clash for the game, which was the weekly that he ran. There's VODs of Tampa Never Sleeps tournaments for it. There's VODs of all kinds of tournaments if you just want to see what things were like. And yeah, just support your weeklies, whether they're online or you're lucky enough to have like locals or anything. Just anything that has DNF, just enter it just to support it. Even if you're a bad player and you're going to get washed, you might as well just enter to make the entrant counts bigger. Encourage more people to join.
Yeah, enjoy it. Enjoy yourself. Experiment and try to have a good time. Oh, by the way, chat, the Discord that I'm in, that you see on stream here that I just posted my meme in, that is the server in general that he is referencing here. This is the DNF Duel Discord thing here. The link to this server will be in the description below when this is a VOD. So you guys want to, you could definitely come here. There is a character discussion section here for like all the characters here that we talked about and more. Everybody here that's on the roster is all listed here. Where there is a character specialist that has something here or something was posted and discussed here. So there's always tech that is readily available. How accurate or how up to date it is, it may vary with the person. So just seek to ask questions and you will get answers.
Yeah.
I believe that shall do us for tonight. And GoneMadd, I appreciate having you on here tonight.
I appreciate you inviting me. Yeah. I guess.
All right.
Final message. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're good. No, for those of you guys
I didn't have one.
Go on ahead here, and you didn't have one, really?
No, I didn't. I was gonna make one up, but
go for it. Well, here, let me give you some time to make one up. While we're here, chat, go on ahead and follow GoneMadd here. He's one of the top DNF Duel players for the representation of Ghostblade and even for Spectre. Feel free to go ahead and leave him a follow here on his general Twitter. And he does have a Discord here too if you wish to follow that too and be a part of his following. Definitely follow him and support him. He's good people.
Well, like I said, thank you for having me on. Definitely don't go into any Discords that aren't the Reddit Discord. It's not worth it. Even if it's my Discord, it's still not worth it. Just stay to whatever has the most people in it, I guess. It's not worth going into tiny, split up communities with very few people in them. Especially when you're already in a very low population game. That's the lesson I learned. But yeah. I guess peace to everyone watching, now and in the future.
Okay. Who would you like us to raid?
Is anyone playing DNF Duel? You should raid Training Mode Network. Yeah.
I take offense to that. I like Jax. I won't follow him now.
I will not speak on Jax. Well, I would, but we're out of time.
Damn. Okay. Fair enough.
Hey, I mean, it's your podcast. You do whatever you want, man.
No, this is yours. You're the guest.
Yeah, no. If you wanna, it'll take me a while to, because my interactions with Jaxvex and Rezby are a long story, and it would take a while. So I don't know if you would want to stick around for that.
It can be a revisiting point if you like.
You mean like in a future thing?
Mm-hmm. If you like, I can have you back on, and it can be a revisiting point depending upon how much further down the rabbit hole of Dungeon Fighters we go.
I mean, yeah, if there comes a time when you would want to hear my perspective or other people's perspectives on probably the largest controversy or drama the scene has seen, then yeah, we can have a discussion about that. I'm not gonna like push for it because I am definitely a past is in the past type of person, but
and that I definitely understand, and I do want to respect people's wishes of those that are involved, but also respectfully, to understand how we got here, we do kind of have to look back at that.
No, I get that. I mean, it's the kind of thing where the people involved, they have, they've definitely had their share of, they definitely made use of people to signal boost their side of things, and I've kind of stayed quiet on it, so I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, I don't want to.
Okay, then that will be a part 2.
If I start, then I won't stop. You know what I mean?
I got you. Okay, that'll be a part 2. Once our schedule realigns, we'll go on ahead and we'll delve into it. You said
All right.
training mode network?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, they
Oh,
run.
they are in
beginner-
DNF Duel. Hey, what do you know? This is actually perfect.
Yeah, no, it's very serendipitous.
Okay. All right, so chat, we're going to go on ahead here and close chapter 13 here for the space bridge. Like I said, feel free to go on ahead and follow GoneMadd as you guys can in order to get updates from him and his media source. Eventually, I will have him back for part 2, and we're going to go on ahead and delve further into the landscape of the past to better shape the future that is still ahead of us. I'm going to take us on over to Training Mode Net Neo, where DNF Duel is going on right now for their representation for I think they're going into top 8 losers quarterfinals. So we're gonna go on ahead and support them, and you guys can enjoy a really good tournament for tonight. Stay tuned for when the space bridge opens again. You guys got my emotes? Spam them. That way people over there in the TMN know where you come from here at the Iacon battle circuit, like you know. You guys have a blessed one ahead out there. And like I always say, till all